Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of Rock and Roll, the enrollment marketing podcast created by VisionPoint Marketing. My name is Christian Jessup. I'm the company marketing manager here at VisionPoint, and today we're on part four, probably our final part of our series about our adult learner research study we conducted. I'm very excited to be joined today by Cassie Fleming, marketing strategist here at VisionPoint Marketing. Cassie, how are you doing?
Hi, I'm really excited to be here. It's a thrill to be on the podcast.
Today, we're talking all about the best messaging for adult learners. So, if you've listened to our prior episodes on the series, we've talked about an introduction to why adult learners matter, who kind of makes up this audience. We had an episode on media planning for adult learners, their kind of media habits, where they are and aren't at right now. And then our third episode was about nurturing adult learners, whether that be via email, text, maybe even social media. So today, to kind of end our series, we're talking all about messaging and strategy for adult learners. What messaging cuts through the noise? What really resonates with them? What did they say they aren't necessarily drawn to? Cassie, let's just get started. As listeners will know from previous episodes, it seemed like cost was coming up a lot with adult learners. This was very important to them, something they're concerned about. We saw that in terms of the graduate audience, 45% of graduate learners have over $50,000 in student debt already just from undergrad. And then 66% of our primary adult learner audience is concerned about student debt if they even go to school for a degree, for a certificate, anything like that. So, what should that tell us about prioritizing messaging when we're seeing a lot of adult learners are concerned about cost, but not necessarily interested in hearing about the data and the numbers?
Sure. The first thing that sticks out to me is that not all data is created equal. Some data feels real to adult learners, and cost is that main figure that feels very real. That's something that they're going to have to carry forward. And it's something that they're going to have to carry forward starting on day one of your program. As far as rankings go, a lot of times adult learners might see that as an institutional bragging point, but not something that's really relevant to them. That doesn't mean that schools can't use rankings. Rankings can be really great competitively to help showcase how you're different than other colleges. But it's all about using rankings in a way that actually feels relevant to those adult learners. If you're able to say that you're number one in ROI in the state, that matters a lot more than saying you're number one in, say, innovation. And there's data beyond rankings, of course, too. If you're able to say 90% of students would recommend our program, that's really powerful. And that's a little more powerful than saying students love us. So it's not that you shouldn't use data. It's not that data is necessarily boring or it's not catching people's attention. It's about using the data that actually matters to these students and knowing that students are coming into this a little bit scared, feeling like they have something to lose. And they do, they have money on the table. So speaking through the lens of we understand that. We understand that there's cost and we're committed to making college worth it to you is really compelling. A lot of schools are afraid to talk about cost. I can't tell you how many times I've gone through a college's website, a graduate program's website, and I've seen lots of things that excite me. But when I try to figure out what is it actually going to cost me, I'll spend 30 minutes, I'll go to 8 different web pages, and I still don't know. And I get paid to do this. So if I'm in the shoes of a student learner and I'm sussing out programs and I can quickly find that you're number two in innovation and I can find some quick stats about your student body ratio, but I can't find how much money it's going to cost me, it might feel that the institution's priorities are different than mine.
And sometimes, even though this is rarely how institutions think, sometimes it can even feel like they're hiding that from you. Like they don't want you to know, which only furthers, it seems, the concept in our mind or an adult learner's mind of, oh, this is going to be expensive. And they're not telling me because they know this is going to be way too expensive. I think an important thing too, I loved what you said about like not all data is created equal. It's not all framed equally. And a big part of that too is when and how we share this data too. So like you said, it might be that like when we're first looking at a college, if we're an adult learner, one of the first things we're going to want to know is cost. Can I even afford to consider this? Does this need to be something I'm thinking about doing? Or like, can I not afford to go back to school at all? Whereas, like you said, a lot of times that's something that's not easily accessible on the website, and it might be months down the road of you signing up for emails, filling out a form, receiving calls, and then when you're already in that consideration phase, then you find out the cost, and it's like, wait, I can't afford this. So I think, and then on the flip side of that, so many times we're working on ads for our clients or landing pages for our clients, and our clients are pushing for, like, like you said, rankings, number one in innovation, 5-to-1 student faculty ratio. And those are important things, but is an ad, the first time as adult learners sees this, is an ad the best time to be pushing that, as opposed to once they're perhaps in our lead nurturing cycle, and then we can tell them we have a great student faculty ratio, we have these great rankings once they're already getting more and more involved. So I think that's a big part of it too, is these adult learners are used to seeing that data first when they don't care about that. They just want to know if they can even afford to go back to school. Whereas maybe that needs to be further down the cycle. That was just something I've been thinking about the more I've been like looking through the report we made.
I think there's two big phases in an adult learner's journey to return to college that we can consider in this context. One of them is the weed out phase, looking at things to see if it's even possible.
Hmm.
And you have to make it through that stage before adult learners start thinking about, okay, is this a good fit for me? Now that I know I can do it, that it hits my very basic boxes, I can afford it, that it has my program, then I start thinking about, is it the right fit for me? There's a lot of concern that I've heard from client partners over the years of, oh, adult learners won't want to do our program because it's not online, for example, or it's only offered at certain times of the day. One of the surprises from this survey, plug here that you should definitely read, read the full results. Christian did a beautiful job packaging those up. One of the surprises is that adult learners don't necessarily prefer online programs. Why is this relevant to this conversation? One of the reasons that I think online programs can succeed with adult learners really well is that if you look at any of the major online programs and you go to the landing pages for their ads, they'll say up front, this is how long the program will take, this is how much it will cost you, this is the modality. And that's information that adult learners really crave. And they don't necessarily look at that and say, oh, it's going to cost me $12,000. I'm in, I'm sold. But they look at that and they say, okay, now I know where this stands and I know how to begin evaluating it. While they're still looking for information about what are the alumni outcomes? Are there success stories that I can look at? What are the specific courses? But they know up front some of the most pivotal information about whether or not it's a fit. And colleges can be scared, especially with cost, put that up front, which I completely understand. There's a number of challenges with that. But it's also worth noting to what you said, Christian. Someone might be halfway through the process. You've spent time and money nurturing them, getting them excited, getting yourself excited about having the student in your class. And you don't want to find out after months of work that, oh, this was never going to be a fit because we're not comparable cost-wise. So even though it can be scary and it might actually cost you some inquiries up front, to be more candid and make it more easy to see how much a program costs, it's better for both you and for the prospect because it leads to better fit prospects, people who can afford your program.
Yeah, and whenever we looked at the data, a lot of them said, like, in terms of consideration, online degrees are probably the thing that I'm thinking most about doing. But then when you looked at like their perception of online degrees, it wasn't a very high perception. And when you looked at the times of days that they were interested in doing classes, it was very normal times of days. They were interested in classes during the week. They were interested in classes 8 to 5 as opposed to late night. So it almost seems like sometimes higher ed has created this box for adult learners of adult learners have to learn online. They have to come do nighttime classes or weekend classes when the data's not necessarily saying that that's the case. And I think, I mean, that's kind of a side tangent, but I just think that's so interesting of not to say that our data is indicative of every single adult learner across the United States, but it does seem like these students are more varied and interested in more than perhaps what traditional schools have offered them, so to speak. I do want to kind of shift gears though, because another interesting perspective when it comes to them wanting to know about cost, there's a lot of different sides to cost. I totally understand colleges being like, we don't just want to put it on the front page of our website. It's going to cost $20,000 to come here. Do you have that money for us? Here's where to send the check. But there's really good ways to show value, and that can be job placement, that can be success stories, that can be talking about like salary increases. I know at VisionPoint for some clients, we've built these microsites where you can look at the degree, how long it takes to graduate, and then potential career paths that also have like average salary for the career paths, how you can go up in that career. So there's ways to show value, even if you're afraid of showing cost, if that makes sense.
That's the whole name of the game. We talk a lot about how different the audience segments that we work with are, and as a marketer who's listening to this, that's true. You really feel that. But there are some ways in which our audiences are very similar. Learners of all stripes are wondering, is it worth it? And cost isn't the only part of that. It's cost and value, it's return on investment. And you'd mentioned a few ways that you can show return on investment. I'm a big fan of success stories paired with data. We just talked about how all adult learners aren't driven by data, what we call data-driven insights. I think there's an opportunity, especially in mediums like websites, where you've got more content to use and to play with, to show here's what happened to one of our adult learners who took this course. Here's his story. And then here's the percentage of adult learners who are working in their target field, the percentage who got a raise, the percentage who said they'd recommend our program. So there's a way to zoom in by telling a specific adult learner's story and then zoom out by showing data that proves that it's not an anomaly. It's not just an outlier. So I would definitely recommend that. Another piece that I think is important in showing value is show that alumni succeed. We see
Mm.
alumni stories first and foremost in so many adult learner targeted campaigns that are going on nationwide right now. And that's because it works and that's what people want to see. But it's not just about showing that these adult learners succeeded, it's also showing how they succeeded. So yes, you want to start with this is Bill. Bill got the promotion of his dreams. But then your audience might be wondering, well, would Bill have just gotten that promotion anyway? So if you can show a little bit of the secret sauce behind Bill got the promotion of his dreams because this faculty member worked with him to identify this particular aspect that was holding him back, or because he met a student and that student connected him to his network. Show how your students achieve what they achieve, not just what they achieve.
I love that. And I think you kind of even answered my next question because that's really connecting the dots between that realistic, pragmatic, I care about how much this is going to cost me, but also the aspirational look of like, how will this benefit me as a person in my future? Like, and that's kind of like bridging that gap, so to speak. And it's interesting whenever one of the questions in our survey said, when you come across an ad about education, what's most likely to make you pay attention? The top three answers in order were financial benefits, success stories, and job placement. And I think in a weird way, even though those are very different answers, you can see the interconnected elements of that. Well, how can we demonstrate financial benefits? You can demonstrate that through success stories. You can demonstrate that through talking about job placement. So it's all connected. And a lot of times we treat those very separate of like, here's the financial aid, here's a random testimonial, where in reality, this can all be interconnected to tell one complete cohesive story to these prospective students. So, kind of shifting gears here, a big hot topic within higher ed, but also just within our world right now is AI, generative AI. How is that going to change things? Is that ruining our world? Is that helping our world? And so that was a big thing that we wanted to ask these prospective adult learners about. And we got some interesting answers from them. We put two ads side by side. They were looked very similar, but one had in the bottom saying like generated with artificial intelligence. And 57% of the primary adult learners were most drawn to the ads that we showed them that were made with AI, which was really interesting. We also saw that almost 40% of graduate learners said that they thought the AI ads contained higher quality visuals. Um, but we did see on the more concerned side of things that 33%, about a third of our entire audience, thought that made with AI conveys less creativity, and they think it conveys less humanity, less personality. So, talk to me a little bit about that. It does seem like it performed well overall. So, what does this draw towards AI mean for content creation, for personalization, and should there be any concerns with using the technology?
I think there's a lot in that question that interests me. One of the first things that sticks out that I always have to remind myself of as a marketer is that our audience is not a monolith. So 57% preferred the ad with AI. And we've got some people saying there are higher quality visuals and that's appealing, or less load time is another thing that I saw people say would be appealing about an AI created ad. And then you've got people responding to the same survey saying, I'm concerned that this will make the ads a little bit less human. So what it says to me is that adult learners are people first, and they have differences in opinion about AI, just as they have difference in opinion about just about everything else we're going to put out there. It says that AI isn't a deal breaker, which is something I was wondering about moving into it. It was possible that 90% of respondents said, no, we do not want to see ads made with AI. That wasn't the case. So to me, the path forward seems to be that AI continues to be a really useful tool for scaling, for personalization, but maybe not the right tool for coming up with your creative big idea, for anything that involves a lot of high level thinking around how you position your institution, how your graduate program or how your adult learner program connects to the college overall. You want to rough out your messaging strategy, your creative content on your own, or primarily on your own, using AI maybe as a little bit of a research assistant first. And then you can use AI a little bit to scale, to make things a little bit more personalized. Where AI can be helpful is if it makes the content feel a little bit more relevant or a bit more tailored to the audiences. AI is not helpful if it makes the opposite happen, if it feels irrelevant, if you've got somebody with 18 thumbs. That's obviously probably not going to draw people in. It might get your click-through rates up, but it probably is not going to help you in the long run. So I would say what this says to me is that AI is a tool. It's not a no-go. It's something that you can definitely use. And you don't have to worry about being upfront about using it either. In our ad, we said made with AI, but it shouldn't be at the foundation of your campaign and messaging strategy. It's also worth noting what's interesting to me, you called this out too, but I want to remind our listeners, the ads were almost identical. So it was funny to see people saying that they preferred one or the other because they really did look pretty much exactly the same. So it's just revealing underlying beliefs about AI, showing that people are open to it. I think
Yeah.
another consideration here is what programs adult learners tend to be interested in. A lot of adult learners are interested in business and management programs, which do tend to be a bit more AI forward and more involved with artificial intelligence. Similarly, healthcare is a program of interest. So a lot of these adult learners are coming in with more academic interests that might align with wanting to learn new technology and new skills. And a program using AI might signify to them that the school is being savvy about this new and upcoming technology.
That's a great point. Yeah, that gave me a chance actually to pull up our study. 35% of adult learners are interested in business and management. 30% of graduate learners are interested in STEM. So you definitely see the connections there between, okay, these are very tech heavy and tech savvy audiences. So of course it makes sense that maybe they're looking for that or drawn to that in terms of the ads that they're seeing. But yeah, it is funny. I think it was a little bit of a placebo effect when you're showing pretty identical ads that we're just saying one was made with AI and one isn't. But like you said, I thought it was interesting and encouraging or discouraging, depending on how you look at it, that there wasn't this overwhelming sense of, no, we don't want any AI ads at all. They definitely are open to it. And I think you said it's all about using it the right way. And I know that's something that VisionPoint has still been researching and talking about, but we always want to make sure that even if we are using AI, that it still is being touched by a human. It's never the final product. It honestly isn't at a point right now where it could be for the most part, but I do think using it to help you tell the best story you can, and like you said, whether that's personalizing, whether that's making it more relevant to our audience, that's the best way to go ahead and use it. So yeah, some really interesting things there, seeing that they're open to it, and maybe even chances for colleges to kind of be upfront about how they're using AI and how students shouldn't be afraid of that. So let's kind of shift gears once again, and talk a little bit about ways that students don't respond to in terms of messaging. We already talked a little bit about data-driven messaging. That's something that they're a little bit drawn away from if it's not the right data. But it was also interesting to see, we hear all the time people saying like emotional responses are the strongest responses to ads. And it might be that adult learners are underestimating how well they respond emotionally to ads. But whenever we were asking like what mattered to them in advertising, we saw that only 22% of adult learners said they cared about emotional storytelling in the advertising. So I feel like that might have made them seem a little skeptical or pragmatic about higher ed. So, but at the same time, we're building these campaigns and we're not just building robotic AI campaigns that are just going to be showing data and figures. And so, again, it's telling this interesting story of no, we don't just want all data, but also don't be this sappy emotional storytelling. So, all of that to say, when we have this weird kind of dichotomy, this picture, how do we make storytelling still feel relevant and not like this overly dramatic soap opera that our audience is turned off from?
I would love to see a school just go all in on being a soap opera.
Yes.
If you're
Yes.
doing that, call me, text me, I want to know about it. That's a great point, and we say all the time at VisionPoint, oh, this is a tricky needle to thread, or it's hard to find the balance. And that's what this question is about. It's about balance. It doesn't mean that you never use emotion, doesn't mean that you never use data. It's about using emotion and data in the right places. One of the gifts and curses of being a modern marketer is that you can use so many different tactics to tell your story. One of the ways that benefits us is that we can use emotion-worn tactics like short-term video, which we know that adult learners prefer and want to see, and which can be both educational and entertaining. You can use more of the data and ROI in text-based messaging, like in search ads, and you can combine them to tell a cohesive story on things like a campaign landing page. So there's opportunities across the variety of media that you manage as a college to lean into what's emotional, to lean into what's practical. There's also the opportunity to do some testing because, like you, Christian, I I struggle with this because on the one hand, I believe that we should listen to our audiences and we should be humble about that. On the other hand, I am a little bit skeptical about that 22% figure because I think I'd say the same thing. If someone says, oh, when you're making a big life decision, do you focus on emotions? I would probably say, no, of course not. I'm perfectly rational and logical, but I know that's not true about myself. So I would expect that emotions may play a bigger role than people think. In the survey, what we learned is that many of these adult learners are going back to college because they want career advancement. That's not exactly surprising, but also a lot of people want to fulfill their potential as well. So it's people can want multiple things at the same time. They might want the career advancement. They might also want some of the emotional messaging. So I'd say there's places for both. And there's also opportunities for testing. A/B testing is going to be your friend here. You can try out messaging that's really focused on the cold hard facts. You can try out messaging that's a little bit more focused on the warm and fuzzies, and you can see what performs best for different audiences.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's interesting. We're not meaning to get on this podcast and just say colleges are doing it wrong, but it kind of feels a little bit like what we were talking about with the data-driven statistics and students not responding to that. It's not necessarily that you shouldn't be using it that way, but that maybe traditionally we've been using that data the wrong way. And maybe we should think the same thing about the emotional storytelling. Like, maybe students are used to seeing that emotional story in the wrong place, whether that's the wrong channel, like you talked about. There's very specific channels where you should be employing a more emotional arc as opposed to a more data-driven arc. So I think it might kind of come back to that same thing of like, if you're doing it correctly, then people are going to respond to it correctly. And maybe the students that say, no, I don't want emotional storytelling have just been exposed to poorly done emotional storytelling. That transitions us well to the next question because I think a big part of students not responding to emotional storytelling is that it doesn't feel authentic. It doesn't feel real. You're watching it and you're like, no. I mean, we talk a lot about the sea of sameness and about how you see that stereotypical college ad where you've got a row of students, every age, race, gender, you name it. It's this perfect utopian community. And you see that, you've got the inspirational string music swelling in the background, and you're watching it and you're like, this isn't real. This is Hollywood's picture of what a college looks like. This is not what that community college or that graduate program looks like. So, what does authentic creative actually look like for this audience if we're wanting to show them an authentic picture of higher ed, an authentic picture of what their future could be? How do we make sure that we show them that we give them that emotional, that storytelling angle without feeling generic or tone deaf or just fake?
Mm. It's really hard. And I think that's part of the reason why I'm still employed. So I'm not going to say that I'm glad that it's hard, but this is a challenge that fills most of my days. And it's hard to answer that at scale because some of it is going to be talk to your specific adult learners. That's one of my favorite parts of my job. And it's something that I'd recommend for you. If you're a marketer at a college, see if you can actually talk to the adult learners who come to your college. There's some substitutes. You can, for example, look on Reddit if you're a large enough school. You can find a subreddit and you'll probably find some adult learners talking about their experiences. That's useful too. But if you at all can, I would say talk to the actual students who already are coming and get their perspective. That will help you a lot. Another point about authenticity, I would say authenticity here, it's something that's relatable and useful for adult learners. So you don't want to just tell them a really entertaining story that they relate to, but at the end of the day, they're like, wow, that's really great for Bill. That Bill's the adult learner I'm following through this. That's really great for Bill, but I don't know if it's great for me. You also don't want it to be so story based that it doesn't get to those data points, primarily cost, that we already talked about. So I think it's important when you're building authentic creative to think about, are you talking about what's in it for them? And are you doing so in a way that feels believable? A lot of these adult learners, especially graduate adult learners, know that it's going to take some time to see payoff for their programs. And we see some programs that are trying to optimize here in really interesting ways. Even on the undergrad side, we're seeing some schools rush towards creating a 3-year degree, which is interesting. We're seeing certificates have a meteoric rise in interest. So that's shorter. There's a shorter time frame towards when you finish the program and see profits. But if you're going into a graduate program or you're going into a 2-year program, you know it's going to take some time. So it might feel a little bit unrealistic to have a rags to riches story that's super sped up. This is Bill before he joined our program. He was suffering. But look at him now. Everything is perfect. They know it's going to take 2+ years potentially, depending on your program, to see those results. So another part of authenticity, I think, is showing maybe realistic steps on the journey from where an adult learner started to where they are now to where they're going. I think whenever you can tell real student and real alumni stories, that's always great. Another thing that's helpful for adult learners is if you can, if your program actually has been designed in a way for adult learners, show that, really, really brag about it. When I've spoken with adult learners, I worked with a few programs where the pedagogy was designed specifically for adult learners, and they said up front, adults learn differently than teenagers do. And when I talked to adult learners about the program and why they came, they said it was because they felt like they would belong there, which is interesting. It's a very emotions-based
Yeah.
reason to attend college, a little bit at odds with that finding about only 22% of people being driven by emotion. But they really felt that the program was designed for them in some way, that the college wasn't looking to them as a new revenue stream, that they took the same program they made for an undergrad and just said, okay, and you can join too. So when it's possible to say, hey, this program was designed specifically for you or with adult learners in mind, I would definitely champion that.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to what we were talking about a little bit earlier, where it's like you said, not enough adult learners see that belonging component in a university, which is why they sometimes feel like they're just forced to do online because at least online programs know let's message to adult learners in their busy lives, and that's not something that all of the other traditional programs necessarily have, because we see like adult learners are interested and on YouTube all the time. They're using YouTube as a search engine, as a social media tool. And colleges have done really well in recent years of using YouTube Shorts to show these like day in a life of an undergrad student. But I feel like I've rarely seen that for adult learners, to where if an adult learner is searching for a college and adult learners, are they going to find a video showing this is a day in a life of an adult learner at our college? Are they going to find a web page showing adult learners talking to each other, showing how they belong at this institution? So I think that belonging piece is something that's missing a lot right now. But that, like you said, if you hit it, that's really can be a key part of making adult learners feel like an institution is the right place for them. The other thing I wanted to call out that you said that I loved is just, like you said, talk to your adult learners. This research study, I'm really proud of VisionPoint's work on it. It's very comprehensive, but we would never dream of saying this is the definitive data for every single adult learner in the United States. It's really interesting in the report to even see by different regions. Adult learners in the South might have different employment rates and are therefore more concerned about cost or have different times of the week that they can attend classes as opposed to people in the North or the West. And so we saw really interesting responses even regionally. So I can only imagine institutionally how different things are. That's why Vision Point does listening tours where we go out to these schools and we talk with students so that we can see at this specific institution, how do they respond to things? How does that compare to our survey data, to our overall knowledge of the sector? How do we reconcile those things, and how do we put out the right messaging on the right platforms for your specific institution? So I think that's important, is use this research study as a good jumping off point to inform best practices, but also don't treat this as the only source of knowledge when you, the college or university, have access to your students and can get firsthand the same type of knowledge for them as well. So that's definitely something I would encourage people to use, is please download our study, but also please talk to your students. That can be the easiest and best way to make sure that you're reaching them where they're at. So Cassie, one more question before we go, and it's not one that I put in our prep sheet, so I'm gonna kind of throw a curveball at you. I kind of wanted to just ask you, what was to you the most interesting finding in the study, or like one aha moment you had reading the study? What was just that one thing that caught your eye and you're like, huh, I didn't expect to see that?
Ooh, just one is so hard. Can I answer, can I cheat and answer from a media perspective and then as a strategist perspective?
Please, you have the benefit of coming from multiple different perspectives, even within Vision Point. So yeah, please
Yeah.
share your varied knowledge and your aha moments. I'll let you cheat.
I appreciate that. So in my career at VisionPoint, I both run paid media and I now am a strategist. So I look at a variety of different tactics. The thing that stuck out to me through the paid media perspective was how prominent YouTube was. I remember when I was running campaigns for graduate programs in particular, I would immediately default to LinkedIn. Now, LinkedIn is
Mhm.
still an extremely valuable channel. In large part, it addresses the concerns that drive graduate students back to college. You can segment in ways that you can on many other channels. But I was used to a lot of colleges writing YouTube off, and I wasn't thinking about YouTube as much as a tool for adult learners because I thought of adult learners as being extremely pragmatic above all else. Now that I've reviewed the survey, I'm seeing YouTube in a bit of a different light, and I think that speaks a bit to some of the storytelling we discussed, where we talked about undergraduate videos where people say, hey, here's a day in the life, but even at a higher, more cultural level, we have a lot of scripts for what does it look like when an 18-year-old goes to college. If you
Mm.
watch like any major TV show, you're probably going to see some 18-year-old going off to college, and that's framed as something really aspirational and cool. You know, just watch Gilmore Girls. And spoiler alert, Rory goes to college. Uh, I actually forgot that in Gilmore Girls, Lorelai also goes to college, but it's so hidden and under the radar. And I think that's true for these adult learners as well. There's not really any sort of cultural or social script for what it looks like to go back to college, especially if you're what we called a primary adult learner for this survey. There's more social scripts about what it looks like if you're going to pursue your master's degree. Let's say you dropped out of college and you're coming back as a 50-year-old. there's not really any guidebook for what that looks like. It's really hard to picture. So now when I think about YouTube and why people are using YouTube, it makes sense that people would look for information there. And I'm getting really excited about its potential. I think colleges can shy away from using it for adult learners because making videos is really tricky sometimes. But I think it doesn't have to be as polished as you might be thinking. And it can still be really valuable to bring data points like cost and like value to life. So, from a media perspective, the prominence of YouTube, that was the big aha moment. From more of a strategist perspective, what surprised me is the percentage of adult learners who said that they felt that the country was headed in the right direction. They felt really confident about the future of the country, versus the percentage of adult learners who said that they felt in control of their own life. Generally, adult learners were much more optimistic about the future of the country than about their own control over their lives and how much autonomy they had. I think we can reconcile that as people who are interested in returning to college, they feel that something is missing. They might feel even that they're getting left behind. So there's a loss aversion that we talked about in the beginning of this podcast episode. You're going to college, you know that it's going to cost you money. Our clients, and you listening to this, you're competing with the status quo. And the benefit of the status quo is it doesn't necessarily lose you money, at least not up front. But there's still something driving people, even knowing that it's going to cost money, even knowing that they're really afraid of student debt. There's still something that's driving these learners to move forward. Because I will say, we also looked at people who are adults without a college degree who don't want to go to college. But the majority of the survey focused on people who do. And even with that fear, they're still moving forward. And to me, an indication of what might be moving them forward is this sense that they feel like the rest of the country is maybe doing a bit better than them or moving in a different direction. Maybe others have more freedom. We talk about freedom a lot with college, with undergrads. For undergrads, college is suddenly the freedom to do so many things that they've always wanted to. That's a combination of college itself and getting to be an adult. I know I personally was so excited to eat whatever I wanted. Sorry, mom, in college. I should clarify, my mom's a wonderful cook, but I don't think she would let me eat cheesecake for breakfast, and my college did. So for traditional undergrads, there's a lot of freedom to do all these new things. I think for these adult learners, they might be viewing college more as a freedom
Mm.
from anxiety about being stuck in a dead-end job, freedom from not being able to take care of their family. And I recognize that there's going to be some upfront costs and challenges with doing that, but the sense that they don't maybe have as much control over their life as they want to, that might be something that's driving them. So when we're talking about what struck me as a strategist, it's that little data bite.
It's very poetic. Freedom from instead of freedom to. I love it. And that lines up so well and brings it all full circle with the end of this podcast series. In the very first episode, Matt Walters was talking about how encouraging and motivational it was to see that the top reason that people said they actually want to get a college degree wasn't financial growth, though it was very, very close. It was personal growth. And people define personal growth a lot of different ways. That could be still financial, that could be, salary, that could all fall within personal growth. But the idea of people just want to better themselves. And like you said, like improve their situation, like do better. And so I think just seeing that data point and like you said, like the different reasons that might draw these adults back to college as opposed to a traditional undergrad student, it's really motivational, it's really encouraging, and it's kind of eye-opening to kind of view these aren't just a mass data group. These are individuals, these are humans just like you and me, and we should talk to them like that. Cassie, thank you so much for joining us. This has been a wonderful conversation. To our listeners, thank you for making it through all four podcast episodes. If you haven't downloaded it by now, what are you doing? Go download our research study. We've given you four podcast episodes telling you why you should download it. You can Google VisionPoint Adult Learners and it'll pull up the study first thing. Or if you want to email us, info@visionpointmarketing.com, You can ask us for the study, and you can ask us to talk. We can go through the research study together, talk about how things might apply to your specific institution, the challenges that you're facing, the strengths that your institution has. So we'd love to make the study even more personal to you that way. So please reach out to us. Please download our research study. And thanks again for listening.